If you look at your business through this framework, it'll tell you where you need to focus your time and effort.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Jeff Heilman Project, your go-to podcast for systematized success. This week, we're jumping in with both feet into business growth. Jeff's done multiple startups. Jeff has also been in a business of his own and ramped up his own businesses. Is there a common denominator for a tool in order to start your business?
It would be the framework that I'm about to give you, which took me till I was 50 years old to figure out. And I had to live it. And I had to live against it and break myself against a failure of understanding it. And if you look at your business through this framework, it'll tell you where you need to focus your time and effort. Number one is identity. We need to be an integrated person. The word integrated, I think it comes from a Greek word, integer, which is a whole number. The word integrity comes from that root. When you are a whole person who is not fractured, you are not wondering if you're going to make it. You're not possibly could, might, oughta. It's shall. Once you get the identity of yourself whole, complete, unfractured, everything else downhill is going to start to flow a little bit better. Now, my identity is in Christ. I'm a Christian. I go to a Christian church. That doesn't have to be your identity. I don't think that you have to have Christ to have integrity or to be integrated as a whole person. But that was my path. The second thing in the leading indicator for success is to understand constraint theory and the application of constraint theory. I've done a podcast earlier on the application of constraint theory. Anything that gets in the way of the one thing that is the biggest blocker to your business growth at any one point in time is a distraction. And you are wasting time, money, resources, and payroll if you are not focusing everything in your business on removing the biggest constraint for your business's growth. That's how Elon does it. That's how Steve did it. That's how Henry Ford did it. That's how everybody does it. But you can't apply constraint theory if you don't first understand yourself as an integrated whole human being who is capable of greatness. Number 3 in the framework is systems. Those systems could be Kanban. They could be Six Sigma. They could be lean manufacturing practices. They could be checklists, standard operating procedures, and on and on and on and on. Whatever your daily operating system is for your business. If you don't have a daily operating system for your business, good luck. A pilot who has lives at stake has an operating system and a series of checklists that are in a binder, and they start on page 1 and they go to page 5 before they turn the engines off and get out of the plane. A great book to double click on that is Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Verne Harnish. It talks about the systems that Rockefeller used, which are effectively a chalkboard to write down the daily rate of transportation cost of crude oil by the barrel based on the different railroads each day, and a telegraph operator to get the data he needed to update his chalkboard. With that, he ran a 62,000 person company and became the richest man in the history of the world by the age of 35. When we understand our identity and we become whole as people, we understand that constraint theory is the applied science to focus and prioritization. And then we move to systemization and standardization, from standard operating procedures and checklists to burn down charts to Kanban project management. That then solves the fourth problem, which is intensity. Once we have identity, constraint theory, systems in place, intensity is only necessary on a very small percentage of the projects and a very small percentage of the times we're working on things. I did it wrong for, 30 years. I focused on intensity. Work harder, work harder, work harder, work harder, work harder. More calls, more calls, more calls, more calls, more calls, more calls, more meetings, more calls, more meetings, more calls, more meetings. And eventually I was like the salmon swimming upstream. And eventually I started working in 2004. I started working on systems, which allowed me to pivot as an inside sales rep at a credit card collection agency. I was able to move from horrible to the top 3 to 5 collectors every month out of 400 credit card collectors, simply because I started counting the right thing. I shifted my KPI and I created a system around that. I started measuring the number of net new people I got on the phone instead of dials. And that shift in KPI is what allowed me to feed my family And then I took that skill and went into software and created 60% of the revenue of a failing Silicon Valley tech startup as an inside sales rep who on day one thought a server was the gal that brought you the check for the beer. I had no idea what I was doing in software, but because I had the right KPIs and the right systems and the right intensity, I was able to smash my face against a wall long enough to get us sold to Cisco for $80 million. That was in 2004, but I would not learn about systems, like actual systems, for another 5 or 6 years. And then I would not learn about constraint theory for another 21 years. And it was only after I started studying constraint theory that I realized that identity being integrated was the most important piece. A is leading indicator, B is trailing indicator. A1 is identity. A2 is constraint theory. A3 is systems. A4 is intensity. B is trailing indicator. B1 is cash flow. B2 is capital for reinvestment. B3 is freedom that comes from scale. And B4 is creativity, flow state, agency, coherence, and sovereignty that comes as a function of freedom, which allows you to do the very best work that you're doing. And right now, I happen to be doing some of the best work I've ever been doing in my life because I've had some cash flow that's become capital, which has become freedom, which has become total free license and sovereignty and coherence and full agency to do the best work that I'm doing. That's the whole thing. Ultimately, the happiest people on earth are the ones who are doing the work that matters to them the most, totally freed up from the result in the short term. You're postponing, you're trading short-term dopamine for permanent artistry, craftsmanship, and satisfaction.
I remember in the past when we've talked about your startups, as you've been going through your startup process, and I don't mean on this show necessarily, one of the things that I think that I've heard you speaking of the most, the companies that were failing that you were a part of, were the companies that weren't actively going after the consumer to find out what the consumers needed. The engineers had an idea for a product, or maybe the creators of the company had an idea for the product, but they weren't aggressively going after the consumer to find out what it is that they needed to build.
If you want to go out of business as fast as possible, just don't pay any attention to what your customer wants. That'll set you out of business pretty much faster than anything else. I think most people that are doing startups, if you get around to funding, you have found some sort of product market fit. Startups don't typically fail because they don't have a good idea. Startups typically fail for two major reasons. One is they don't execute. They don't do what they need to do, which leads to constraint theory, which leads to identity. Number two, they have bad timing. So they might have the right product, but they're early. Or they have the right product, but there's already congestion in the marketplace. And so you have to reach critical mass at some point in there. And if you reach critical mass too early, you can burn up before the market's ready to adopt the product that you're making. And if you reach critical mass too late, look at Sarah Blakely, right? Yeah. With Spanx, for example. Sarah Blakely, she gets her nails done. It's summer, it's hot. She has a party coming up. She wants to show off her pedicure, so she wants to wear open-toed sandals, which means she can't wear pantyhose. But the dress that she wants to wear showed panty lines because it was really thin and really form-fitting, and she wanted to look as good as she could possibly look. So she goes, I know what I could do. I'll take some controlled top pantyhose, cut the feet of them off right at the calf, which will be just above the hemline for the dress, and voila. And she sat on that idea for a year and went and did prototyping and didn't tell anybody about it. And she's like, who is going to steal this idea from me? Somebody is going to try to steal this idea from me. Is it Legs? Is it Victoria's Secret? Who is going to actually try to take me to the mat on this? And nobody was doing it. And so she says, okay, I'm going to execute on this and I'm going to put everything I've got in it. So she quit her job selling copiers and she camped out inside of Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom to make sure and point everybody and people started buying them. And then they're like, wait a minute. She's not supposed to be in here. And by then it was too late because people had already found out about it. And then everybody was asking for Spanx end caps, and $1,300,000,000 later, since nobody believed in her or invested in her when she sold a controlling interest to BlackRock a couple of years ago, she got to keep all the money because she saw the problem and executed with the right timing.
In 2026, we really are working diligently to listen to you. So if you are a consumer of this content, have any suggestions or would like to leave any comments or remarks regarding the topics and the tools, what tools would you like to see?
I know what I think works. I know what I'm used to using, but I started using ClickUp 3 years ago. ClickUp's been phenomenal. I'll put the affiliate link in the podcast hub. I saw the ability to have a static list on an Excel sheet inside of an application that could be web-based or mobile app. I'm like, that's great because Excel is a major problem there. If I'm sitting here doing like this with Google apps on my phone, it's got a mobile app that works perfect. It absolutely translates to both an app on my MacBook, an app on my iPad, an app on my iPhone, and a web browser when I'm traveling. You could take a static list and you could put it into a burn down chart. You could put it into a Kanban board. You could put it into a checklist. You could put it into, a tiered list or an Excel sheet. And I was like, I'm in. I would have built that if I could find it out. There's tools coming out. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do when you really start to apply this framework. I got a quote here from Chateaubriand. A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing or she is doing and leaves others to determine if he is working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both. The purpose for identity, the purpose for constraint theory, the purpose for systems is to reduce the pressure on us to be intense in everything that we do so that we can start to take cash flow, turn it into capital, turn it into freedom, and turn that freedom into agency and sovereignty and coherence in everything that we do. And that's when work and play starts to come together. So
looking forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody, for watching the Jeff Heilman Project. We're so glad to have you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe.
Thanks for being with us, everybody. Bye-bye.